Josh's plan, when he was rushing to the body of number 5, was just that if he could not destroy the core, then in that case he would just move it. And now his plan succeeded, where his gigantic ice opponent roared in rage because a passage through space had opened directly within his body. When the portal was closed, because it had expired, the core which provided the monster vitality was wiped out of him entirely. Motionless and without any strength, the giant became normal flakes, which were falling and cracking into pieces. Josh felt that the people who were now inside the tent were probably really scared. When suddenly the heart of the giant appeared, the young man received some messages from the system on how to improve his attributes, where the most agreeable aspect was that the fellow now had the choice of the call of the 7th clone. At this time, he did not desire to call number 7 and settled with the ones remaining with him in the success of the mission. Leaving behind the pieces of the ice giant, the rescue team, now consisting of 5 of them only, kept traveling. Casper Fields, an S-level world-renowned hunter, was completing his morning bath. After he was already inside the room, he was told that the list of individuals who had requested to see him this month was ready. The young man asked to put on the screen all the information regarding individuals who had requested to see him. Once the list was checked, Casper realized that none of the Korean organizations were fastening his shirt. He thought very strangely because everything had somehow been a failure, and this time something had shifted. After he had finished dressing up, Casper asked to turn down everyone's permission to encounter him and to start opening the academy. Sitting facing the big man, Fred instead greedily consumed Chinese noodles. Facing him, Hugh realized that he comprehended why he could not access his comrade for so long. Recalling the recent past, the man pointed out that the pack of wolves led him to Moonstone, since he was not in a place to finish the task in the land of hunting hare horns. Relying on the fact that the fat man pointed out, Fred succeeded in evading him after he remained uncertain for a moment. He responded that they assisted him with it without requesting the man for information. Hugh told Fred that he had a lot of work to do, which Fred would begin the following day. The two men's conversation was, however, interrupted by a loud bang on the door. The fat man went ahead to open the door, anticipating who could be taken to him at the time. But before the man could open the door, he received a merciless blow immediately, which led him back to the middle of the room. Fred quickly ran to his fellow gang member, asking him if he was all right. Meanwhile, Peter's face, radiating joy, stood in the doorway, announcing that he was extremely delighted to finally meet Fred. The guest assured the men that he would spare them little time, where he only needed to know who plundered their people at the beginning of the hunting ground. While the man looked at his interlocutor's bloodied hand in horror, Peter went on to state that he would be the third individual they asked this question to that day, where the other two replied that they knew nothing. But then the man's statement was cut short by the fat man, who showered the man with the finest choice of curses and attempted to strike him. But Peter put an end to this savage attack by merely lifting his hand, noting that he also had a few tricks up his sleeve. And therefore, showing off his strength, he pinned his opponent's hand so tight that he was actually squashed on the floor. Then, hitting Hugh once more, Peter ordered that next time he first ensure that his strength would be powerful enough to hold off the enemy. Fred stood in awe, paralyzed on his face, watching as this cruel man, whose face never ever strayed away from his grin, assaulted his boss. And thus, he shielded his fellow man's body to stop, and that he was ready to leave with them. But from the expression on his discussing partner's face, one could guess that he was completely surprised at what he had just heard. Furiously insisting that Fred was going with them anyway, whether he liked it or not, Peter pushed him away with one blow to the face. Those who were with this ruthless man stepped aside and left him. Frolic and Peter continued raining increasingly harder blows to the fatty's head, and finally, with another incredibly powerful blow, hurled Hugh a couple of meters closer. Peter was ready to continue this torture with the assistance of his legs, But Fred then shrieked that he had overheard everything and would report it to him straight away. Falling on his knees, he begged the man to desist, claiming he knew the fellow who attacked the Moonstone boys. Regardless of how unusual it was after these words, Peter somewhat relaxed, turning around to those who had come with him here. He furiously spoke of how only such behavior could result in regular and quick verdicts. Josh and his faithful clones kept wandering across the snowy world in quest of the distraught group. At some point, the young man instructed all to trot further incursions from then on. After scouting across, the captain of the rescue party summoned all to begin paying special attention. They walked for a very long period, but during this entire time, not a single monster waylaid them, and all that was encountered along the way were corpses already turned into skeletons. Gazing at the next corpse, Josh wondered who killed all these people. He had asked one of the clones where they were now. The fellow learned that he was just at their destination, and thereafter he ordered them to begin searching for any sign of the missing group, which must be hiding somewhere here. Josh started recounting how the group should observe the outside condition every day just after noon, but then saw one of his clones coming towards him armed with a knife. Coming around the corner suddenly, the young man saw how the clone finished off the fight with a knife and could also see the eyes of the enemy that glowed very soon. The whole body of the monster appeared, and it was now easy to view it clearly. Josh, without concealing his surprise, observed as the monster that just appeared became invisible once more. This was an enemy who had the ability to become invisible, but this immensely deadly monster was not single-handedly present here. This was the reason why there were heaps of dead bodies present here, and the group couldn't flee after all. Now, both he and his clones couldn't sense the presence of the enemy in advance, getting themselves trapped. The mind of the young man was agitated by a fresh onslaught of a hitherto unknown monster. Having missed this throw, the young man retaliated against the beast, dismembering it into 2 pieces, after which he informed his clones that they would attempt to blast their way through from the other end. The fellow attacked the next monster, but soon realized that both he and the other competitors started utilizing the invisibility power once more. Before everyone's very eyes, all those encircling the rescue team vanished into thin air in a flash. And while Josh stood up and attempted to decide what to do in such a situation, he at once noticed how easily his clones defended themselves from the attacks of an invisible foe. The young man could not even imagine how they did it. From outside, it was quite simple for them. After making the decision to study it, the young man returned the control of the body to number 1, and now he already issued him the command to clear the path for further movement, where his clone at once charged to execute the obtained order. Josh had time only to notice how number 1 managed to repel the attack of an unknown adversary, where just after this one he counterattacked, most of which were effective. Having listened and watched intently what the clones did, the fellow understood that they were responding to the noise of the air being sliced by their foes. Observing the clones, Josh realized that he actually still had much to learn from them. Susan was sitting on the floor of her small interdimensional pod and was overwhelmed by her tearful thoughts. At some point, the girl was taken outside of such a state by a teammate's speech, in which they said that finally, the time had arrived for a daily check of the conditions outside. Blake's sister no longer believed that a rescue team would ever arrive for them, but she could not convey her negative thoughts to the entire team. And so she snapped her fingers in an effort to open the exit from such an interdimensional repository. Completely certain that she would not pay attention to something new outside, Susan walked towards the opening exit. The girl was even afraid to see such an emptiness, a snowfield scattered with corpses of other research team members. But as soon as she reached the exit, her perceptive ears immediately picked up some new noises. Meanwhile, Josh took the experience of the clones to heart, playing in his mind which side the enemies were on and where to prepare for a new attack. But when number one successfully parried a double strike, the young chap realized that he had not heard one enemy. But the fellow did not give up, concluding that he simply needed to practice more in this new business for him. The fight against this new enemy, the young man understood that these monsters possessed no good speed and defense other than invisibility. None of their other attributes are damaging, and thus even though number one was parrying some attacks, at the same time, Josh understood another gigantic advantage of his enemy, where we were discussing the incredible amounts of this actual army of monsters. Of course, in the process of combat, the clones took small damage, which now did not create much issue, but as they piled up, the clones would start rotting in some manner or other, so it must do some things and find a means of escape somehow. And then, out of the blue, within the eyes of this young man, a gateway started opening. Immediately realizing that this was the personal domain of the sister of their leader, Sapphire, Josh commanded his clones to move immediately towards this rescue gate. Susan, observing the clones fighting the invisible monsters, initially almost whispered the word human, but immediately she turned around and exclaimed loudly to the entire crew that there were individuals out there like their leader, that a lot of people no longer felt that they were ever going to be led out of here. But gazing down the vacant corridor, the entire group was sure that a number of people were indeed in their direction at the time. Everyone who was in this subspace sat upright at long last, coming to the realization that they would finally be rescued. The very first individual to realize that the monsters were approaching them behind the rescue team was Susan herself. But quickly, everybody else as well came to realize that those individuals who rescued them eventually lead them to their destruction. But Josh himself did not believe so, shouting very loudly that he had come to assist people in need. But at the same time, he also believed that a little assistance wouldn't do any harm to him then. And it was becoming apparent that humans would need assistance. The group leader commanded assistance, and so the weapons-carrying members of her group marched out for a fresh battle against the creatures. For the first time in almost infinite months before anyone was a man who thrust his shield into the snow cover aggressively. Shortly afterwards, which the entrance of the interspace was blocked by an energy field. Another member of Susan's group also utilized one of her abilities, and suddenly he stretched his arm with his staff before it. At the same time, magical symbols formed in the air, from which vines started to stretch. These long vines went through the bodies of those individuals who were chasing Josh and his clones, and in this manner, the rescue group finally reached the protective dome, where the chasers behind them were unable to cross this barrier, and after proceeding a few steps, a group of clones were already in between space, celebrating their rescue. Meanwhile, Susan issued the protection order to be cut off, after which she would close the portal of her own dimension. What a man and a girl did nearly together, leaving nothing for the monster. Turning towards Susan and speaking thankfulness for it, Josh declared himself to be the commander of the rescue team, though now in reality he himself had been rescued. The whole group he came for got up and gazed with astonishment at those who arrived here in a bid to rescue them. The talk began with Susan asking the young man if he was a member of the Sapphire Association, to which the fellow quickly answered that only in part, because he came here at the invitation of the association leader, Blake Calderon. Whereupon the fellow with the shield happily commented that their manager hadn't abandoned the team after all. So unexpectedly, Blake's sister suddenly became bright and asked Philip if he was okay, where Josh himself had to assume that this fellow was the same guy who emerged out of the portal injured, and thus he replied to the girl that the young man was alive, but to the best of his knowledge, he hadn't achieved consciousness yet. Watching the reaction of Susan, the young man realized that she cared very much about the well-being of the members of the group, but Josh clarified that the head of the association himself was outside the door of the Viking Tower, and thus he proposed departing from here at once, Where to go back, he had scrolls of teleportation, but suddenly his desire was interrupted by the leader of the group who had attracted Josh's eyes. Gazing at the crying face of the girl, the young man did not know something was wrong, where she ought to be glad the group had been rescued at last, and then turned around to see that the group consisted of 10 individuals, where one of them had come back wounded. The implication being that there were supposed to be 9 individuals here, but they were 8 of them. At one point, apparently having obtained resolution, the group leader abruptly made a speech to the effect that she had been given the absurd of her future requirement, but still, he would want to request the rescuer to bless them with one more favor. Without knowing what was happening, Josh inquired about the type of request, and Susan told him that one of their group members had passed away. But she did not want her body to stay forever in this ice and snow universe. Now the young man realized why there are 8 of them here now. Feeling sorry for Susan's loss, Josh requested her to tell him what happened to that girl. Beginning her sorrowful story, the girl realized that it was an actual ambush. For a good while, the group traveled without having any monsters in between, as is normally the situation. Within the group was a healer, a lady named Tina, who relaxed like everyone else, walked at the very end of the column. It was there that she was ambushed by a killing blow from an unseen enemy. As soon as the man carrying the shield started to blame himself for Tina's death from among them, where he spoke out that he could have been more vigilant and observant. Hearing this narrative, the young fellow noticed to himself that in his incident that he was attacked first, which indicates the monsters tend to pick on the weakest member of the group to attack. And Susan went on talking that when Tina got attacked, she opened her dimension immediately and instructed the group to retreat. And hence, all the members of the group, warding off the attack, covered the retreat of their leader. Because if anything were to happen to her, then the whole group, without the option of retreating into an interdimensional dimension, would be destroyed. Once inside, she immediately radioed the emergency by a telepathic scroll, but everything was going so fast that nobody realized how one of the invisible beings was inside the dimension. Philip, who realized that Susan was obviously being ambushed, and he ordered her protection right away, where the death of what entered inside his body also triggered the teleportation scroll. But as it was, not one but all the teleportation scrolls available were triggered, which released a lot of energy. This is why the group could not back, and how the scrolls brought this narrative to its end. Susan gave evidence that the portal had already closed when the entire group had not even reached it, and could not utilize it, as her own dimension would have been lost, and all the rest to death. After hearing his interlocutor, the young guy, without asking intrusive questions, asked where the corpse of the dead girl was. Opening a small window to the outside, Susan brought the guy to where Tina's corpse lay. Estimating the distance, the guy realized that he cannot do without an encounter with monsters, but he could not provide Susan to toss her body here because she stuck here voluntarily still for the sake of her group. After keeping himself engaged for a couple of minutes thinking, the guy finally told the truth that he would assist in carrying the dead body, where Susan herself and group members thanked him instantaneously. But Josh added immediately that he finally approached here to rescue the group, and thus, in the case of actual mortal peril, everyone should abandon this notion and use the use of the teleportation scroll. The girl fully concurred to this because Josephine dupes were surely not needed. And then the young man spoke the second requirement through which he agreed to assist, where the members of Susan's group will delegate this assignment to his team. When Susan overheard this, the girl wrestled with offering to simply provide cover. But Josh quickly cut her off her words, staring deeply into her eyes. He assured Susan not to worry because in front of her were not human beings but clones. Were the leader of the group supposed to know anything, but not this type of statement? In steps small, the man wandered about the office with standard office gear scattered around its corners. Sitting on top of a man on the ground, the uninvited guest explained that the pesky hunter for his team was registered with this agency, and Peter, smiling wickedly, but the torturer went on with his torture, raising the victim's hand to the crook. Threatening that he was going to request again, beginning to twist the joint, the monster interrogated the hunter who crippled his people. But the insistent agent instructed his tormentor straight away, after which he broke the man's arm. From where the latter felt exquisite pain, he was going to be the second hand of the obstinate head of the agency. But then one of his henchmen got his attention, presenting the boss with a piece of paper. He saw they themselves would be able to learn the dude's information. Reading the paper, Peter expressed how glad he was it was free. The man gave over his hand because eventually, or sooner or later, they were going to learn something about his employee anyway. At the moment when he was giving an order on sending people to Josh's flat, the man appeared in the corridor. The girl overheard men discussing what to do with Martin and what to do in order to send people to her savior's home. Of course, she moved away right away, recognized these people from the Moonstone Association, to conclude that affairs were not right. Here, the ground agent asked his torturer why they wanted Josh, and in reply to this question, Peter said that the reason first was that he had beaten his people well. The most important thing is that his hunter came into their den and took away all of their power crystals. Emily was shocked to learn this fact because it so happened that the onus for everything that took place rested on her. Hearing that clones were standing alongside her, the girl attempted to utter something regarding illusions. But Josh would immediately understand that they were certainly not illusions. He then went ahead and finalized his plan, stating that numbers 4 and 6, along with a teleportation scroll, would be keeping the gate to this dimension. And numbers 2 and 3 will accompany him to pick up the corpse of the dead girl. He once more requested Susan not to step outside herself and not to release any of the members of her party outside here. A man joined in the discussion, stating that they too possess abilities and can assist, to which Josh had responded that he did know the morale of the group, but it was his duty to bring all the survivors safe and sound here. Susan attempted to recollect the man how he himself remained alive from monsters, to which the young man responded that he, unlike others, was to some degree immortal. Ending this discussion, the young man once more stated that all of them have to strictly adhere to the plan that he designed, where the head of an agitated group had no option but to embrace the Savior's offer. Opening the window of characteristics, the young man sensed that during the last 6 months he improved only his characteristics, in which he learned and already was at some level. The power to inherit some of the monster's characteristics he killed that contributed to him growing up so rapidly, and now already was on readiness to run for Tina's body. He also put near one of the vials of potion that Emily gave him, with her decision that in this case all means were good. Turning to number 4, he instructed him to release the weapon that he had been using, and he himself, taking number 1's form, would not be coming back from this mission, left the 4th his demon sword and a strength drink. The final instruction that he issued his clones waiting on duty near the dimension gate was that they should leave immediately from this location as soon as the girl's body was shipped out to the dimension. Here, Susan expounded that those critters which the group brought along have a tendency to always stay in one location, being active only when someone is around there, and thus now, at the very entrance to another interdimensional dimension, there is probably a big stack of monsters. Having obtained necessary knowledge, Josh and his clones went away to finish the next mission, and now the young man was already outside, having left the safe dimension to fix his gaze on the dead girl's body. The young man estimated the distance to it. At some point he gave a stern command to move, where together with the clone, he ran in the direction of the designated highlighting. The spotlight to the people who stayed behind, guarding the entrance of the interdimensional dimension, signified that the rest stay away from the entrance. The men to their leader's side continued to emphasize that they needed to save these guys. But then Susan reminded them again that this location is 40 kilometers from the entrance, where you totally can't get here just by running away from the monsters. So she told the others to trust the guy who claimed he has a plan, where the rest just need to have faith that he will survive. In the meantime, Josh was already starting to drive away the enemies who already got a hint at the presence of intruders and started attacking. The young man was incredibly happy that he started being able to hold back the attack of ghost monsters by himself. Even though there were a lot of enemies, the young man instructed his clones not to hesitate the advance. The corpse of the slain girl was already in close range, but still, much of the way to the target lay through killing enemies and parrying their attack. Josh rushed to the target as fast as possible. Suddenly, he heard and felt how one of his clones was attacked from behind and injured. Josh realized straight away that now the monsters on the other side of the entrance to the dimension were likely able to reach them. Making up his mind that there was nothing left to wait, the young man pulled out a mana potion and drank the bottle in one go. The man could sense the action of what Emily provided him with her. In parallel, he pulled out his pistol, activating the skill of mana-charged cartridges, in which he now had an immeasurably enormous excess of mana. The pistol shot resembled more the launch of some sort of intercontinental missile that leveled everything in its path. An entire horde of monsters to the body was obliterated in an instant, and the way was cleared. Susan's crew, observing the course of this expedition, was stunned at what non-trivial talents this guy showed. When the smoke from the shot subsided a bit, Josh realized he could now easily access the body as if he himself could not move. The young man ordered number 2 to grab Tina's body, and now, number 2, with his brother in arms, already enshrouding the corpse of the dead girl in an advance-prepared piece of cloth, and Josh was able to feel how, after having drunk the potion, the amount of mana just kept on building up in his body. Feeling that he would soon literally burst, the young man declared that he would drive the focus of all the monsters away by clearing the road back. And so, the corpse of the girl was packed full, but already the team was surrounded by monsters on all sides. Realizing that he could hold out for only a short while, Josh commanded his clones to flee to the access to the dimension. And once the clones were sufficiently distant, the fellow terminated the pursuit of them by kicking the 1,000-year-old ice, where his blow was simply ridiculously immense and flung all of the monsters trying to follow the clones airborne in all directions. Simultaneously, the tidally channeled flow of mana supported those who took away the corpse to move faster without the expenditure of bodily energy. And now they were standing outside the doorway to the interdimensional dimension, listening to Susan's gratitude for sending the dead body exactly according to his master's order. One of the clones unrolled and ripped a teleportation scroll. But then, the members of the group started to get nervous, justifying that they could not utilize the scroll since there was still one member remaining outside. And Josh, alone on the battlefield, was already surrounded by all sides by masses of monsters from whom he no longer defended himself. Susan kept on, attempting to go back and assist that fellow, but the clones irresistibly pushed the girl towards the portal. The girl cried and struggled with every ounce of strength she had, but the clones were more powerful. And now, the disappearance of the actual entrance to her dimension was proof the group had finally been rescued. Stealing the number 1 baseball cap from his head, Josh smiled openly and declared they would be meeting again on the other side soon. After that, he let all the energy that had been able to accumulate in his body loose quick. The effect of having taken Emily's potion was a genuine body explosion.